Hello there. You're listening to 10 Questions, where we discuss the wet plate collodion process and the photographers that create these unique images known as ambrotypes and tintypes. I'm your host, Chad Shryock, wet plate photographer for Pork Pie Photography based in Fort Collins, Colorado. In each episode, I've asked a modern-day practitioner to sit down with me and talk about how they got involved with this vintage process, share some information on their gear and studio, and provide some valuable insights into their creative process. So whether you're just beginning to dabble your toes in the collodion ethers, or you're a seasoned silver bath expert, hang on and see what develops with 10 Questions. In this episode, I've asked a very creative artist who is pushing the boundaries of wet plate collodion work. She not only photographs still life objects and subjects for portraits, but is also known for creating enchanting pieces of jewelry with collodion images on glass, stone, and precious gems. Joining me from Tulsa, Oklahoma, I'd like to welcome Angie Brockey to 10 Questions. Hi, Angie. Thanks for being on the show.
Hey, Chad. Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
Glad to be here.
Great. You were one of those people that I thought about when I was putting together kind of this list of potential guests that were really doing something a little bit different with collodion.
Great.
Yeah, on your website, you talk about the different mediums that you've used to express your creativity. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what drew you into the arts in general.
Boy, well, I grew up in Missouri in actually a creative musical family.
Okay.
So as far as the arts goes, it was pretty much all music. And my family sang together. My sister and I sung together. My sister and I actually ended up writing music together. And that was pretty much my whole focus. Except in school, I loved all the visual arts. I was very, very drawn to that. So there for a while, I was thinking, what do I really want to do? Do I want to follow my music or do I want to follow, the visual arts? But, with being in a musical family, that was kind of the forefront and the focus, and I absolutely loved it. So I thought that was going to be my career. My sister and I had quite a bit of success in taking playing in Tulsa, but then taking some trips to New York. We were working on getting signed, and that was all about to happen. It was kind of the puzzle pieces were kind of coming together.
What kind of music were you guys focused on?
It was our own thing. It's really hard to explain. We loved Kate Bush. We loved Cranberries, the Sundays. But, we had kind of our own feel. We loved Tori Amos, things like that, Sarah
Okay.
McLachlan. So the two sister thing with the harmonies and all of that was pretty neat. We loved it. So all of that was happening for us. We had another trip scheduled to go out to New York to lay down some drum loops for some of our music. And then all of a sudden, the sibling thing kind of got in the way. And it kind of crashed that dream. So I was just absolutely kind of without an identity after that. I was pretty down. I mean, that's to say the least. So I spent a good 10 years, 20 years of my life almost not really knowing my direction. And I started a family, so that became my direction. But of course, being a creative person, you have to do something creative. I feel like the music kind of thing died, and it was very, very sad. But I feel like kind of in its place grew up my visual art kind of desires. So I started drawing and painting after I started my family, and it was very fulfilling, really great. I've never really been totally into photography. I mean, it's been intriguing to me and interesting, but it wasn't my focus.
Okay.
Then my husband, he's a really awesome photographer, Justin Brockey. he had been doing quite a bit of photography, digital work, and he was just really getting tired with digital. He wanted to kind of go back to the roots of photography. So he started researching wet plate and fell in love with it. And at this point, I wasn't, I was just thinking, oh, great, that's good for you, kind of thing. And he wanted to spend some money and, put a dark room in the basement and invest in some cameras and lenses and things like that, which
Yeah.
I wasn't completely happy with because it was a lot of money. But yet, at the same time, I wanted him to follow, a passion for himself and be able to be creative. So he just fell in love with it and he started making wet plates. And he started, saying, Angie, you've got to do this. You have got to try this out. And for several weeks, I wasn't interested. I just wanted to see what he was doing. But then he talked me into it, and I went down in the basement, but I set up a shot, and he took me through the process, and I absolutely fell in love. It was just immediate. So the rest is history.
That's fantastic having a teacher with such close proximity.
Yeah, exactly. He was my mentor. I didn't really have any other mentors. Of course, there are wet plate artists that I totally admire and think are wonderful, but Justin, he was definitely my mentor.
And I guess just to bring in the provenance, so where did your husband Justin learn the process from?
He bought a manual and
Okay.
just followed the manual. I should have written the guy's name down, but I'll try to think of it.
Let's see, we've got John Coffer, Mark
Yeah, that's
Osterman.
it.
Okay,
It's
yep.
John Coffer.
Okay,
Yep,
the
he
Doer's
bought.
Guide.
Yes, he bought that and absolutely taught himself through that.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so it's exciting.
So you mentioned that you weren't very excited at first whenever your husband was setting up all of this stuff in the basement, and
Right.
it's probably not the best thing to have a chemical storage facility at your house, right? But what
Yeah.
was it about I guess the either the look or the experience of collodion that really got you interested in the process?
As soon as I started capturing my own, shots and my own ideas, the aesthetic of it is absolutely what I've always been drawn to. So I don't even know why I wasn't in love with it at first. I think I had to, get into the mix, start my own journey with it to really see how it melds really well with my aesthetic and what I kind of envision as something that's beautiful. Um, I love, things that are beautiful but have a little bit of dark to them. I don't know why exactly. I think maybe it kind of goes along with my personality. Things aren't always roses and butterflies and rainbows and butterflies. So life can be kind of dark and sad. So it's kind of like it's intermingling sadness with the joy of life. And that's kind of what I like about it.
Very interesting. Whenever you first started shooting collodion, did you have it in your mind that, okay, most people are using this to capture still lifes and portraiture? Were
Hmm.
you thinking at that point about, well, how can I move this to a different medium? Or were you kind of
No.
in the like everybody else, like, okay, let's set up some flowers and get my kids to sit down and let me take their picture? How did that go for you?
Yeah, I just started playing with it, I mean anything that came to my mind. I started spending, at least 4 to 5 hours, sometimes 8 hours a day in the dark room. And so I was like a kid in a candy store. It was like, before when I would draw or paint, I loved it and it was fulfilling, but it took so long, to complete a piece. And and everybody talks about wet plate being a long process, and it is, but for me it was very quick. I could see my vision come to fruition very quickly, and so one thing would lead to another. Of course, I love still life and I love portraiture, and tried out everything and wanted to step my toe in every part of the process and every genre of doing wet plate. But it seemed to be one thing led to another. I I don't even know exactly how it happened.
I mean, that's a pretty interesting viewpoint that you're coming from, because a lot of folks that have really started off from the digital side of photography
Yeah.
think that, oh, this process is so slow and, it takes forever. But then I guess coming from an idea of, oh, well, if I'm painting a picture, then
Hmm.
that could take days and weeks to see what the final image looks like. So for you,
Right.
this was probably a huge advancement in
Yes,
completion of work. So,
exactly.
yeah.
It was so awesome to have an idea, you know, set it up, and then have the finished piece within 20 minutes, 20 to 30 minutes. Of course, allowing for it to dry longer than that, but to see it come to life was just amazing for me. So I think that really kept me going into the dark room. What else can I do? And it was actually, I'd been doing wet plate for a few months, and then Mother's Day was coming around, and I'd already given away a couple of my tintypes to my family members, and they loved it. And then I just got to thinking, it would be really awesome to be able to do a piece of jewelry with with these images. So I just decided, okay, I'm going to do that for my mom and my sister for Mother's Day. I'm going to come up with a way to do a tiny piece, and buy some settings online, and put them together that way. And it was really, really fun. I loved it.
Yeah, that was a great spark of creativity. Before we get into the jewelry aspect, tell
Yeah.
me about your first plate that you created. What was it? How did it go?
Yeah, it was orchids. I set it up in I think it was my dining room. And of course, Justin was, taking me every step of the way. And it was really, really interesting seeing, in the ground glass on the back, seeing the image upside down. It was a little awkward.
Right. Yep.
And it didn't feel completely natural. It was like it didn't feel natural, but it did, because it wasn't like something that I just had to do correctly. I was just playing with it and having fun, and kind of just letting my husband know that I'm trying it, because he had been bugging me so long. So I was just very relaxed with it, and got it set up, and took it, and just to see that image come to life, as you're fixing it, is just there's just nothing like it. It was just amazing.
Yep. I think that's
um,
that's what hooks most people that get into this
yeah.
process, right? I mean, it's essentially magic, right in front of your eyes.
Oh, it is. It is just amazing. And then your mind starts wandering and thinking, how in the world did they come up with this? And it's so ingenious and amazing. And so there's just so many different avenues that your mind kind of starts to wander into when you see the process happen.
Yeah.
And so I was definitely hooked. And it turned out really good, with Justin being by my side and leading me every step of the way. My first plate was actually a pretty decent plate, It was pretty clean and captured a pretty nice feel to it. But of course, there's always improvement to be made after your first plate.
Sure. Yeah, I would think that's a big lead up to having someone there handy that's experienced with the process to kind of walk you through that first one.
Right. I
Um,
never would have tried wet plate if it weren't for him. So very thankful for him, introducing it to me and making me do my first plate.
yeah. Angie, how much of your wet plate experience deals with jewelry versus portraiture today?
um, well, uh, it's kind of hard to say, because I've gotten to a place where I want to do several jewelry pieces, the tiny little images, and also capture the same scene, in larger plates. So I'd say there's more of the tiny pendants that I do, but then I like to do this, like I was saying, the same scene with 4 by 4 inches, sometimes 8 by 10, 5 by 5 sometimes. So it's probably more pendant, but I still want to do my larger plates as well.
Okay, so Angie, can you let us all in on the secret of how one goes about shooting images on a medium that may only have one flat side?
Well, I I've been asked this question several times, many times, and I've kind of teetered back and forth on whether I'm gonna, let that little secret out or not. It's really hard for me. Some days I'm thinking I want to just give it away and give away the secret and let people know it is a very, very simple thing. People probably laugh when they find it out, but so there's people that tell me to give it away and want me to talk about the secret, and then there's other people that say, Angie, hold on to that. That's you came up with that. You need to hold on to it for a while at least.
Yep.
So that's kind of where I'm at right now. I feel like I'm holding on to it for a little bit, but then eventually, I'm not holding on to it for dear life. I feel like at some point I'll either write a little pamphlet or give the secret out in some way, maybe do a workshop about it to let people know exactly how I'm doing it. But like I
I
said before, it's actually simple stupid is what it is.
Okay. I completely understand that. I mean, I'll
Yeah,
be honest, this is essentially a trade secret. This is your
right,
IP. There are very few. I mean, honestly, I can only think of a couple of folks that are
right,
really taking pictures on something other than aluminum or glass, right? Or original tintypes. It's just
right.
not the normal kind of thing.
Yeah, that's right. It's very fun, and some one of these days I'll probably give the secret away.
Great, great. Hey, so there are difficulties that come with shooting large plates that some photographers have to deal with, and you're probably at the other end of the spectrum when shooting these kind of gym-sized plates,
Yeah.
right? Talk
Mhm.
about the challenges of working on such a smaller scale, as far as the chemistry and,
Yeah.
pouring and that kind of thing.
Well, of course, focus is extremely important. You know, with a larger plate, at least something usually will be a little bit in focus. With a tiny image, you just really have to hone in and make sure that the position of the focus is where you want it. So that's a little challenging. And then with pouring on a tiny little surface like that, the surface tension of the collodion, being poured onto the plate is not the easiest, and your fingers can definitely get into in the way. And
Right.
pouring the developer too, the surface tension. A lot of my plates, my tiny little plates, will come out with darker spots on the plate because the surface tension of the developer is not thoroughly covering the whole entire tiny little plate always. So I have to really kind of focus on that when I'm doing it.
So I have in my studio kind of a my silver bath tank that I use.
Mhm.
It's just a open-ended vessel, and I've got a little dipper that I put my plates on. How do you go about actually sensitizing these small pieces? You have like a
I
little tiny silver bath tank, or
No, I just use my larger tank and balance them. I have to have the right kind of dipper and balance them in, just the right spot and get them in there. If there's a lot of these little things that I probably could have custom made, or make it a little easier for myself, but I just kind of wanted to jump in and do it, so I didn't want anything holding me back. I didn't want to have to wait to have something made for me or do a whole lot of research to find something that's exactly great. I just wanted to jump in there and do it. So, I kind of got used to just using my large tank and kept going with it.
right? Let's talk about your setup whenever you're shooting these types of plates. I take it, at least it seems like a lot of the images that I've seen look very much like, oh, there's a lot of natural light, especially with the still life
Yes.
objects and things. Is that your primary light source that you use? So you're probably not doing that in the basement, I guess.
Right. Yeah. I have a really great dining room that has a bay window. And so the natural light coming in to that bay window and two windows on the side of the bay window. It just really creates great light for me, and natural is definitely my favorite. If I could use natural entirely, that's what I'd rather go with. But of course, I use some fill light. Don't ask me the technical terms on the fill light.
Yep. Yep.
It's not really my forte, but I'll set up some lights to shine if I need it to fill in. But natural is definitely the way I want to go.
What about for portraiture? Whenever you have sitters in your studio, or maybe you're just shooting family or something, do you use any type of artificial light source?
I usually take the person outside. That's my
Fantastic.
preference.
Okay.
Yeah, it just has such I don't know, that aesthetic of the natural light is what I'm totally drawn to. And it would be wonderful to have a an old studio with the skylights and all of that. I think that would be awesome. But since I don't have that, I usually just take the sitter outside and do it that way.
Okay. Angie, let's talk a little bit about gear. Do you have different cameras for different types of photos? So do you use one for traditional portraiture versus one that you use for your jewelry and kind of gemstone shots?
For my gemstone shots and tiny little images, I have a 5x7 1912 AGFA. Is that how you pronounce it? I don't
I
even
think
know.
so. Yep, I've
Okay.
seen something similar to that. Yep.
But it's a field camera, and I have a Voigtlander lens on that.
Okay.
So that's my workhorse. I use that probably 80% of the time, 80 to 90% of the time, actually. But for my larger plates, well, and actually, I use that field camera a lot for my 4-inch plates, my 5x7 plates. But then I have a reproduction tailboard camera
Okay.
um, that actually my husband had built when he was really doing a lot of wet plate. And I put the Voigtlander on that. We have a Dallmeyer. We've got a couple other lenses that I cannot remember the names of right now. They're not my favorite. So I usually stick with the Dallmeyer and the Voigtlander.
I was going to say, between those two, you sound a little bit like a lens snub, but
Oh, really?
you know, I mean,
I don't even
if you're gonna
know.
have two lenses, those are probably good ones to have, I think.
Yeah, I don't. I'm just so not into the technical side of it, and not in the. Yeah, I'm not really up on all of the lenses and the details on the cameras or anything. That's just definitely not my arena. But yeah, I'm in love with those lenses. They're really awesome.
Yeah. Are there any upgrades that you've got in mind for your cameras, or are you pretty happy with what you're using today?
I just love what I've got. I'm pretty satisfied with that. Of course, in the future there might be little tweaks here and there, but overall, I'm kind of one that just wants to make life simple, you know. And so I'm just loving these lenses that I have for sure.
So it sounds like you do have some older lenses and even an older camera. What is probably the oldest item that you've got that gets pretty regular use?
Probably the Voigtlander. I think it's 1870s, I believe.
Oh, very nice. Okay.
Yeah, and the Dollmeyer I think is in that same time period from the 1870s. I think something like that, 70s or 80s.
Okay. Let's talk about portraiture a little bit.
Mhm.
If you had the chance to photograph anyone alive today, who would it be?
Hmm. Probably, probably some musicians,
Okay.
but I'm trying to think who. Kate Bush would be one.
There you go.
I would love to take hers. Maybe Tori Amos. I don't know. It's really hard to say. I'm not really one who spends a whole lot of time. I mean, I admire people for sure. There's definitely artists in the world who I pay attention to and I think are amazing, but I'm not one who really, I've never been kind of a celebrity worshiper. So it's just kind of, it's hard to say. I'd actually rather take portraiture of people who've already passed on. C.S. Lewis, I love him, his writings, people like that, probably.
Okay, interesting. Let's talk about that. How many? Oh, we got a dog there. As far as sitters that come to your studio, how often do you get to take people's images that maybe you don't necessarily know them?
Not very often. I haven't really focused on that part of the business. I probably could. I could, put out some things online or on social media and really talk about that and promote that, but I just haven't. I love doing portraiture work, but it's probably not my main focus. My main focus is more of coming up with little scenes, that I come up with, little creative ideas that I have rolling around in my head. That's usually what my focus is.
Okay. Some of the scenes that I've seen on your
Mhm.
jewelry uh, seem to be like kind of cutouts and kind of layered type images that maybe you've created. Is that what some of those are, or how do you go about kind of crafting what a scene should look like?
That's exactly what I do. A lot of times is come up with an idea and then cut it out with construction board or construction paper, whatever you call it. And just I have, my dining room has such a great little area of light with that bay window. I'm able to utilize that area with the natural light coming in and have the cutouts there in front of the window. That's usually how I do it.
And then I take it that for creating like repetitive pieces of jewelry, then you can just
Mhm.
kind of pull that scene back out and then recapture it maybe on a different piece of material then.
Right, yeah, or I just do it all in one, a couple days, leave the scene sitting up for a while. Yeah, sometimes when people come over to visit, they'll see a little scene sitting in the window because over a period of a couple weeks, sometimes I'll just do several shots of that same scene. I do sometimes 4 to 6 little tiny images on stone or metal or glass, and then maybe 3 or 4 larger plates of the same scene.
Yeah, maybe talk a little bit about the jewelry side away from the image itself.
Mhm.
Are you, I don't know, do you craft and mold the kind of the holders for these gemstones, or how do you
Yeah,
go
I
about
do.
doing all that work too? Talk about that.
Yeah, in the beginning, of course, I didn't have any expertise or knowledge in making my own settings, so I just went online and found really there's some great quality settings out there. If you do enough research, you can find great settings: silver, brass, copper, and that was a lot of fun for a while. But then I just really wanted to be able to do my own kind of feel for the whole piece. It's kind of like putting a little frame around your image. So I actually took some of my images into a jewelry store one time and just talked to them about it and said, "Is there any way I can hire somebody to make settings for these?" And the lady that I spoke to was nice enough to actually connect me with somebody who I could call and talk to about that. And I ended up kind of having a meeting with that person. They said, "Well, Angie, to tell you the truth, you know, it's it would be way more cost effective to make your own." So I kind of like the beginning of wet plate. I wasn't really excited about doing that. I thought, I don't know if I really want to do that. I just want to focus on my images. But I I got into the jeweler bench, seat and started using the torch, and this person showed me a few of the basics, and I fell in love with that too. So now I have my own jeweler bench in my basement also with a torch and all the tools, and it's just become another really amazing experience to see, what I can do creatively with that in that avenue.
So, what material would you start with when kind of creating kind of a new setting, let's say? I mean, do you, I guess when I've seen videos of this kind of stuff online, a lot of times they start with kind of a wax piece and then they'll, use that to make a mold from and those kind of things. I mean, do you really get to that level where you're pouring molten metal into stuff, or do you kind of start with kind of a base material and then you're kind of adding to it the things that
Yeah.
you want?
Yeah, I haven't done casting yet. That is definitely something that I want to take a look at and possibly do in the future. I just get sheets of silver, sterling silver, and wire, sterling wire, and solder and cut out the shape that I want, and then solder, everything together with my torch. So that's typically how I do it. I make the design. I cut the design out of the sheet metal, silver, and use my torch to join everything together, and that's how it's done. It's really fun.
Nice. I take it that it takes a lot longer to create that setting than it does the image that's going into it.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, the image, like I said before, is usually about 20 minutes, if that. And then the setting can take, I'm getting a little faster now, so it can take me, maybe a simple piece, maybe 4 to 6 hours. If it's a more elaborate piece, it could take me up to maybe a day and a half to do. So yeah, the setting is takes a lot longer
Yeah.
to do.
What new mediums are still out there for you to experiment with?
Oh man, I don't know. I want to see, what else I can do with wet plate. Although I have slowed down quite a bit. I'm not in the dark room 8 hours a day like I was.
Probably best for your health.
Yeah, exactly. That's another element I didn't know if you wanted me to go into, but that's part of the reason why I've slowed down quite a bit is I started to get some dizziness, some pretty bad dizziness, and in the beginning stages I didn't have really adequate ventilation, and I didn't always wear a mask. I for the most part used gloves, but yeah, I didn't always use a mask, and I was a little bit reckless with it. So my health definitely started to pay. I paid the price, and so I've had to pull back quite a bit. I now if I do a plate, it's I'm definitely masked up. I definitely have the ventilation going, and I keep all of my chemicals in airtight containers. I don't want them, the fumes getting out of the containers and going up into my house.
Right, right.
So it's I think it's vitally important. I think it's a pretty important thing to talk about, with other wet plate artists, that it's you got to take care of your health, or you can't be creative. And it's definitely put a damper, on me being able to really just freely do wet plate the way I used to. So I'd highly encourage everybody who's doing wet plate to, have the proper protections, because you want to be able to do it for a long period of time. So anyway,
Important safety tip. Yes, ventilation is
yes,
important.
right, for sure.
I kind of find that the thing that gets to me most is the varnishing piece,
Mm,
especially because I save up kind of a lot of plates and kind of do them all at once. And then inside of my dark room, I've got an exhaust fan, but sometimes I don't turn that on because I'm trying not to like stir up a lot of dust and stuff while I'm
right.
varnishing. And while I enjoy the smell of lavender in the sander rack, a lot of times all the other stuff kind of gets pretty thick in there, and then I find, okay, I need to step out of here for just a minute.
Yeah, exactly. We don't want it to build up too much in our system.
Are there any other ideas for either a particular plate or a series that you have in mind that maybe you've not shot yet?
I've been rolling around the idea of a book with a storyline. I'm actually I kind of on the side do a little bit of writing also. So I don't know though if I'd like to do. Yeah, maybe a little book with some scenes that I can come up with that go along with the storyline, that I create. But then I have another idea for a larger book that I don't know if I would end up using wet plate for the storyline or if I would hire a an illustrator. So those are kind of my big upcoming ideas that I've got kind of on the side burner.
Sounds like a lot going on.
Yeah.
Angie, are you familiar with work from David Emmett Adams?
It sounds familiar, but
Okay.
I don't know for sure.
I put the two of you into a very small group of practitioners that are really creating unique works of art on things other than traditional plates.
Ah, okay.
I think he uses a lot of like tin cans and things that he might find out in the desert. I've seen images where he's taken like the top of like an oil barrel and captured like a large wet plate image on that.
Ah,
Why do you think that there aren't more people using these alternative types of materials with this process?
I don't know because I think it's pretty exciting, to see that kind of a thing. I just don't know. I think that for me, creativity is endless. That's kind of how I try to view it. Is I can think of something creatively, but that's not the end. There's always something more that can be done. And I think maybe some people just kind of get comfortable in their way of doing things, and I fall into that too. Just getting comfortable with what you know. But yeah, wet plate I think is awesome for being able to utilize other substrates. It's such a fun medium to play around with,
Yeah.
for sure.
I mean, let's face it, it's hard enough to get consistency with just using kind of traditional materials.
Right.
Adding even that additional layers probably of complexity when trying to capture an image on something other than
Hmm.
a traditional plate probably demotivates some people, I guess, to
Right.
look into that, right?
Right. But then also I think some of the imperfections are beautiful in wet plate, even, on a surface that's not completely smooth. It can add to the feel of the image. There's been times when I've used stone that has inclusions in the stone, like a crystal that has little inclusions in it naturally in the stone. It can really add to the image. There's a little tree that I made not too long ago, another cutout. I put it in my window and then captured the image on a piece of crystal with inclusions in it, and it made it look like the breeze was blowing the tree because of the way the inclusions were in the stone. So I love that kind of thing. I like combining other things to see what it'll give you.
Yeah, and I guess since you can see those inclusions before you take the image, I mean, you
Hmm.
can use that to your advantage, right?
Yeah, right. Try to position, the image on the stone so that the inclusions will flow with that image is a lot of fun, but it doesn't always work out that way.
Yeah. I guess I'm thinking about an image that I saw that is, I think it's a couple of birds that look like they're flying. And there's
Yeah.
this kind of line that goes across. And for a while, I thought, well, it's like a tree branch or something. But I think it's actually in the stone.
Ah, yeah. Yep. I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah, it's a lot of fun to combine that kind of stuff for sure.
So, Angie, who are some of the other photographers that you look up to or maybe inspire the work that you do?
Well, definitely the Ostermans, are really great. I love the work of Mark Sink. I think he has really great creative ideas. He uses a lot of natural light. Yeah, there's quite a few. I'm trying to think of. I don't know how to pronounce his name, but I think he's in Poland. Powell. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. It's Pawel. and his last name is Smialek. I don't even know if I want to try to pronounce it.
Okay.
But I love his work. He does a lot of portraiture. His lighting is impeccable. It's really beautiful. He just captures the kind of feel. It's his. I just drool over his work. And there's a lot of great artists out there, but for me to really, really, I don't know. He just really impresses me with his work. I don't know. There's a lot of it's so hard to come up with names. Yeah, that's it for now, I guess.
Have you found images, maybe online or, pictures that you've seen that you thought, oh, this would be great on a pendant? This style of
Mhm.
image. I would love to be able to like recreate that. I mean, do you look for ideas or do you just rely on your own creativity for most of your work?
I think I think ideas will spark my creativity. I try not to to capture the same kinds of things that other people are capturing. I definitely believe in individuality, but I think every artist is we pull from different ideas. I mean, that's just how life is. We see things around us even subconsciously that will spark our creativity. But yeah, for the most part, I try to just pull from my own imagination. One artist that I think I've pulled a lot from subconsciously and is Tim Burton. I love Tim Burton's
I can
work.
see that now that you say that.
Yeah, and other people have said that, and I didn't. You don't start out by thinking I'm going to do art like Tim Burton, but you're everybody's influenced by somebody and something. So that's I think somebody I've been pretty influenced by. So I pull from different. I don't pull from usually other photographers. I pull from other genres a lot of times. I think even music. For some reason, music can if I really get into a song and it has great imagery in the song, that can stimulate a visual creative idea.
Very nice. Angie, thinking back to whenever you were first trying to learn about the process, what advice would you give to somebody that's thinking about getting into wet plate?
Definitely have good protection, ventilation.
Okay, safety first.
Yeah, some of those practical things I think are very, very important, and I don't think we talk about it enough. And just have fun with it. I can only talk about from my own experience, and mine is I was just really playing around with it. I just loved spending time just flowing with it. You know, take a look at what it gives you, and then that can stimulate another kind of creative idea. Yeah, so just have fun with it. That's pretty simple, but that was pretty important in my journey.
Yeah, I think we've talked about this a few times on the show, but if you can get through that first plate
Hmm.
and really see that magic appear before your eyes, a lot of times that does 90% of the work of getting you hooked into the process, right?
Exactly. Yeah, you just it's like you have to keep on going once you see that happen.
Yeah. Well, Angie, give us a listing of all of your social media accounts or websites. How do people that want to reach out to you and either see your work or purchase your work, how do they make that happen?
Well, I have gallery representation through Obscura Gallery in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I also have a website, and that's just angiebrockey.com. And a lot of my jewelry pieces are listed there, in my website shop. And then you can find more information about me through that website. Of course, I've got Facebook under Angie Pember Brockey, and my Instagram is just Angie Brockey. And that's pretty much it for right now.
Fantastic. Angie, I appreciate you being on the show today. And I was really looking forward to this because I feel like you're one of those few people that are really doing something unique with collodion. A lot of us are just out here taking portraits and still lifes and as far as something that's extremely unique. Again, you're in kind of a class by yourself with what you're doing, and it's really neat to hear your story of how you got into it.
Well, I really appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun talking about it.
Great.
Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Chad.
Thanks, Angie.
Yeah.
I hope you've enjoyed this week's episode and maybe even picked up some insights that will help you along in your own wet play journey. I'd love to hear from you on who you'd like to have on in a future episode. So send me a message and follow our Instagram account at 10 questions with any feedback. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button on your favorite podcast provider. Thanks for listening to me, Chad Shryock, and my expert guests, and I look forward to you joining me again in the coming weeks for a new episode of 10 Questions.